Good evening and welcome to Backstage Pass, Alumni and Entertainment and Media. Thank you for joining us tonight. This event is part of our 2021 Virtual Reunion Week, which includes alumni panels, faculty lectures, and several fun events for all to enjoy. Please note that closed captioning is available for this event and it can be turned on, as I turn it on right now, it can be turned on using the buttons on the bottom of your screen. Tonight's discussion offers a behind-the-scene look at what it's like to work with a star, create award-winning films, or develop groundbreaking stories. Your trailblazing classmates will offer you an inside look into the entertainment industry. The event will be moderated by Jon Levin. Jon was a business affairs executive and motion picture and television literary agent with Creative Artists Agency, CAA, for 38 years. In 2017, he became Forward's head of motion picture and television development and production division, and this past year founded his own company, Sustainable Imagination. Jon has packaged films that we've all watched countless times, television series we set our DVRs for, and work with clients whose names are the pantheon of the industry. Jon's clients and their films have garnered over 100 Academy Award nominations and 25 Oscar wins. Joining him on the panel is Andrea Meigs, Pier Nirandara, and Josh Seftel. Andrea is a partner and agent in the talent and literary departments at United Talent Agency. For the past 20 years, she has built a clientele that consists of well-known actors, writers, producers, and directors, and has negotiated multi-million-dollar deals in the areas of television, film, theater, as well as branding and books. She's a member of the prestigious Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Science, is an establishing board member for Time's Up, and is on the board of directors for Women in Film. Along with being a member of the Council Motion Picture and Television Fund, she's a steering committee member of American Black Film Festival and on the advisory committee for the Black Film Foundation. Pier is VP of Film and TV at A Major Media, Hollywood's first Asian American driven production company. Prior to that, she was director of development for international content at Sony's Columbia Pictures and represented literary clients and book to film rights at ICM Partners. Hailing from Bangkok, Pier began her career as the youngest English writing Thai author of 3 #1 national best-selling novels and as a literary brand ambassador for UNESCO and often speaks at TEDx events and international literary festivals. Josh received his first Emmy nomination at age 22 with his documentary Lost and Found about Romania's orphan children. He followed this with several more documentary films covering topics from politics to sports. He's an Emmy nominee and Peabody Awards finalist for his ongoing series Secret Life of Muslims. The timely and poignant documentaries which combat Islamophobia have more than 70 million views to date. Josh also directed the breakthrough Emmy-winning series Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, the feature film War Inc., and is a contributor to Ira Glass's This American Life, CBS Sunday Morning, where you can often see his comedic series with his 84-year-old mother, and the New York Times. Please feel free to ask any questions using the Q&A button, and we will try to get to as many as we can in the allowable time. I'll now turn this over to Jon and our panelists.
Thanks so much, Amy. I love movies that I guess they're called, I put the boxes, the becoming movies, you know, how people became who they are. I was involved with the Marshall movie about Thurgood Marshall, becoming Thurgood Marshall, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg becoming the woman that she became, the lawyer that she became. So I want to know, we'll do the rounds here. We'll start with Andrea. If you were going to make your story into a movie, what was that inflection moment when you said, this is the moment I became the person that you are today?
Oh my gosh, the person I became today. Well, I think, well, I can answer that one. As many people know, you know, I initially thought that I was going to have a career as an entertainment lawyer. And I went to law school. I was pre-law at Tufts and then went to law school. And I went to Duke for law school. And coming out of the law school, I was working at the district attorney's office, Los Angeles district attorney's office. And I was put into a very high profile department. It was called SID, which is Special Investigations Division. So that was a division for high, crimes committed by government officials. And I just remember like everybody in my class, the entering class was like, how'd you get that? How'd you get that? Who do you know? Like, and I was like, I don't know. So, and and then I was introduced later to Chris Darden and then later to Marcia Clark. And I quickly learned that practicing law was not what I wanted, and particularly at the DA's office. But it wasn't until several months later that I ran into my supervisor, and he said, we were grooming you to be like the junior on the OJ case. And I was like, no, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And in retrospect, like part of me was like, oh man, what my life would have been like had I stayed and was the junior on that case. But the other part of me was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I would never, to your point, John, be the person I am today. And it was that split moment that I made that decision because I got an opportunity to go to CAA and be in the mailroom and start my career all over again. But I really knew deep down inside that I wanted to do something that was creative. And I have to say that it was that moment that I really feel like I made a career decision that really impacted what the rest of my career was going to be like. And it could have gone either way.
Was it a tough call that you made to your folks and said, hey, I went to law school, I'm working for the DA's office, and I'm making a nice salary right now, but I'm going to go work for no money at all, work weekends into the wee hours of the night to start at the bottom. What was that moment like when you made that call?
You know what? It was a tough decision, but it was actually a very quick conversation. I am the first in my family to be a lawyer, to go to law school. And second generation to go to college. My parents were the first. And so for my parents, the fact that I had gone to Tufts and graduated from Tufts was like, I could pretty much walk on water. And then by going to law school, I mean, they were like, you can do whatever you want. As long as it's legal, you can pretty much do whatever you want. They didn't understand what I was doing. It was more of a decision for me because I had a lot of law school loans and I was trying to figure out how I was going to pay them back. And at the DA's office, there was a loan forgiveness program by virtue of working in the public sector. So it was more like, how am I going to pay for this now that I'm going to the mailroom and I'm making minimum wage, and who knows when I'll start making money. So it was more of a tough decision, but it was a quick conversation. And they ultimately, while they didn't really know what I was getting myself into, they were very supportive.
Cool. Pier, you're in Bangkok, okay? You're a best-selling author of YA books in Bangkok. What was the path from you graduate from Tufts, you go back to Thailand, and what are you making a decision to do? And was there a path at Tufts to say, I'm going to do this? Did you segue and pivot, or did you always want to be an author?
So I guess it all goes back to storytelling, right? All of us, we come together over this mutual love for storytelling. I always thought I wanted to work in publishing. When I was at Tufts, I would go to Candlewick Press, which is like a small publishing company that's like in the square. And I would just stare longingly at it, being like, oh, this is like the dream. I always wanted to work here. And it wasn't actually until I ended up interning at a production company through a connection that I fell absolutely in love with the industry. For me, and I was an international foreign student at Tufts. Working in Hollywood was a total pipe dream. Like I never thought it would ever happen. I never thought it was even like I could even get there. Visa woes was definitely a thing. But I credit so much of my career to Tufts because Andrea, as you know, I cold emailed you about, I was like, hi, I'm like a rising junior or whatever it was back then. I'm looking for an internship, blah, blah, blah. I took this class, et cetera, et cetera. Here's my resume. And lo and behold, you responded and you got me that interview with HR at ICM. I got that internship, which turned into an assistant mailroom, then assistant position and coordinator. And I've been in the industry ever since. And so I always credit, we have so many people who went to USC, CLA and LA. But for me, people are like, oh, did Tufts help? 100% it did, because it made that connection. And as I'm sure you guys can relate, when you meet a fellow jumbo in Hollywood, it's unique enough where it stands out. So that definitely bonded over the love of storytelling, but it would not have happened, I think, without my experience there.
Josh,
here, as you guys know, she's a standout as it is. So when her resume came in, there was something, literally, I'm not even joking, there was something that was that just really stood out. It was so professionally put together. Her letter was very concise and very specific. And she was very respectful of my time. So when you do that outreach, to alums, you have to have all that, or keep all that, as especially as a student, as a young person, you have to keep that in mind. And I said, follow up with me. She followed up with me, and we just stayed in touch, and so it ended up working out.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
great story. I think it was a very great meet cute.
John, I
And
think I did the same thing with you.
Yeah, and I've known Andrea forever because, and when she joined CAA, and I found out it was kind of almost an accident that I found out that you were at Tufts, but it was this immediate bond. And I felt that, we had grown up in the same town, and now we moved to LA. And in a weird way, it's also with Josh. Josh, I got a call from Josh, who was making the rounds to different Tufts people in LA coming out from New York. Josh, what was the accidental meeting that you had that kind of changed your life? Someone who you just didn't expect, you weren't intending to meet that person, but by accident, you were sitting at a dinner or at a party and they changed your life.
Well, I mean, in some ways it was at Tufts with my professor, Seymour Simches. So he was, I took a class with him, and then I really just loved him and took many more classes with him. He was a French literature professor. I was pre-med at Tufts, so I did all the pre-med requirements and was planning to go to med school, become a doctor, then join like Médecins Sans Frontières or something, and go around the world and help people in need. And in the process of my senior year, Seymour was retiring. And so I was like, wow, we should make a tribute to him somehow. So I decided I was going to make a documentary film, which I had never, done before. And I hadn't really taken any film classes at Tufts. But I figured out how to make a documentary. I borrowed a camera. I remember I shot the stills on my desk chair with a little tripod, and had a friend from one of my classes do the voiceover in my kitchen. And we had this screening at Tufts to honor Seymour Simches. And everyone came. Saul Gittleman was there, and all these other professors. And we watched the film, which was, it was an okay film, but it was about a great topic. And then, a few days later, one of the professors that was there called me and said, hey, my husband is trying to help the abandoned children of Romania, and he needs a filmmaker to help him. And so that became the first thing I did after I graduated. I went to Romania and made my first documentary, and I lived in the orphanages. This was right when communism fell, and I was living in the orphanages filming the conditions of these children. And it all kind of came out of this, this through Seymour, and just trying to honor him because I loved him.
Dre, when you look back at Tufts, is there a teacher or a class that you had that you think about when, on your daily life or over the years, you go it's almost like a well that you go to and say, where you were inspired to, fulfill your dream. Pierre, tell us about that as well.
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Pierre, you can.
You know what? I'm so glad you asked that question, John, because I should have brought it up earlier. So thank you for coming back to that. But I was an English and Spanish double major, and I always, I always thought I was going to go to maybe, I didn't know I was going to go to law school, but it was something that was in the back of my mind. But I was in English class. It was a literature class. And my professor was Professor Elizabeth Amos. And she asked to speak with me after class, and I was so nervous. I was like, oh. I was like one of those moments like, oh my God, like, what is it? Like, am I gonna, am I failing? And am I not gonna get through this class? Like, I just, like, my heart just sank and I just was sweating. And so I stayed after class, and she asked me kind of what I wanted to do. And I said, well, I'm thinking about maybe going to law school, pre-law. And she says, no. And I was like, she doesn't believe in me. I was like, I just felt like so dejected. And she said, I see you doing something much more creative. I'm looking at your writing, and your writing is so expressive, and it's so creative, and it's so, you elaborate and you create these worlds. And I see you doing something more creative. And I thought, that sounds like that's a compliment. So I always remembered that. And I didn't know what I was going to do with that, but I always remembered that. And so cut to obviously 20 something 30 years later, where I am at the intersection of the creative world, my law degree with negotiating contracts, and then the creative side of reading scripts and giving notes to clients and helping clients kind of, figure out these creative, vehicles that they are going to, journey upon. And it reminds me of that moment and that conversation. And I'm so grateful because I never forgot that. And it always is in the back of my mind about, I see you doing something more creative.
Interesting. Here.
Yeah, for me, I actually, two classes kind of jump out. I mean, one of my, I feel like a lot of us or a lot of people probably on this chat have taken like making movies. Back then when I was at Tufts, it wasn't, I think filmmaking was only a minor. There wasn't even a major about it yet. And I remember taking it. And the other one that really, really jumped out was fairy tales and modern film, which is a part of the X college. And that was probably one of my favorite things about Tufts, was just all these like wacky classes that you're able to take. And you're kind of quite, you're like, I can't believe I'm getting college credit for this. Like, this is amazing. I get to analyze Mulan and Treasure Planet and watch Once Upon a Time TV show and like talk about feminism through these lenses, which surprisingly is so pertinent now to like what we're doing in Hollywood. This is literally that. So that one, I remember, and my professor, Jennifer Burton, was so, supportive and just like trying to link me up with people in the film industry. And it just felt like, oh, I can't believe this is actually a viable career. Like I could actually follow through with this. So those are probably my two favorites.
Cool. Let's kind of segue a little bit to the favorite thing. What is the favorite part about your job right now? We've been in this very weird year plus, and we're kind of getting back to everybody really being back to a version of the new normal. But Josh, the favorite thing about what you do as a director?
Well, I would say, this is going to sound strange, but a few years ago I met with an agent, and he said, so what do you do? What's your thing? And I said, well, I do a lot of things. I make documentaries, for HBO and PBS. I did the show Queer Eye. I direct movies like War Inc. I do a series with my mom on CBS. I contribute to This American Life. And he said, so you're like a jack of all trades. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that was a compliment. And it's funny, but that's sort of I don't know if that's an old school way of thinking, or if it's just sort of the way Hollywood is. But honestly, like, that's what I love about my job, is that I can do so many different things and switch from doing a radio segment or a podcast to directing a movie, to doing a fun series with my mom. Or I just have sort of, I don't know, I just love that I have that freedom to not get bored with one thing. And that's kept me engaged and excited about this business for the last 30 years. Is just trying new things all the time and learning new things, and just trying to get better at everything.
Right, you're starting at a new company. You joined a new company not too long ago.
Mhm.
What are the things that you took to this new company that you've learned over the years? Where you say, I'm now starting at square one, you're not the kid out of the mailroom, okay? You're starting out with a very respected executive. What were some of the gifts that you brought to this new company, and that kind of to say, I'm going to change this company. I'm going to give this new company my point of view. What were those kind of things that you brought to them?
It's funny that you mentioned that because, and it piggybacks on what Josh was just saying. I wouldn't describe myself as a jack of all trades, Josh, but I would definitely say I'm one of these people that I have lots of interests. Like when I first went to Tufts, like I was really interested in nutrition. So I thought, oh, they've got a great nutrition school. And then I was like, I really like horses. And I was like, they've got a really good veterinarian school. And then I was like, well, maybe I could be a doctor, but that went away really fast. And then the poli-sci and the international school. And I was thinking, I love, Spanish is a second language in our household. And so, I thought I would do all these things. Cut to, I go to, law school, and I thought, well, I could do all these different things. I go to CAA, and I remember thinking, gosh, I remember interviewing with Arlene Newman. John, you'll remember this. And like, what area are you interested in? I was like, oh, I'm really interested, well, actors, and well, I like writers and directors, and with newscasters, and sports. I really love sports. We didn't have sports at the time, and I thought we should have. I really like sports. I was just like one of all these people. So I say all that to say, that's kind of, I guess, how I am, or a little bit of who I am, is that I have lots of interests. And so when you look at my list today of my client list, it ranges the gamut from, Ellen Burstyn, who, is the quintessential, just, I think one of the best actresses out there, still working at 87 years old, to, Quinvijay Wallace, who's nominated, youngest actress nominated for an Academy Award. They couldn't be more different. And then I represent directors and writers, and just signed a gentleman who's a visual artist. He's a visual artist and has sculptures and paintings, and he wants to translate his art into a narrative film that we're working on right now. And so one of the things, to answer your question, John, that I brought is, I've always been that type of person when I was at CA and even at ICM, that I see so many different things. Even working with a lot of my music crossover clients, I saw them as musicians, but I also saw them as actors, and I saw them as producers, and I see them as directors, and see them as, game creators. I've always thought like that. And so when I came to UTA, that's what I thought I was bringing. But what I learned, John, is there's a lot of people like that at UTA. That think in that range. And I've learned, and that's one of the reasons why I was excited to come, is that there's so many different divisions that I never even heard of. Between our ventures division, and there's a growing podcast division, and then there's the digital division, and then there's the IQ division, and there's so many, there's so many different divisions. And one could say jack of all trades, or you can say varied interests. But I think at the end of the day, what I find is that, we are creative beings, and we have a lot of different interests, and you've got to kind of feed your soul and feed your client's soul in that way. And so I'm just glad that I've now kind of found a place where I'm with a lot of really like-minded people that are also doing the same.
Cool. Pier, you're at a new company. It has an opportunity to be everything and anything. Tell me about some of the new things that you're doing, with this new playground that you're in.
I never once thought that it was ever going to be an asset in Hollywood to be an Asian woman who's foreign, ever. I always used to kind of thank the lucky stars that I have a ethnically / gender ambiguous name. So I could be a white dude, you never know. I've gotten was very, a lot of kids were very disappointed when I was a new kid in school or in class, because they'd be they expected a hot French guy, and I clearly was not a hot French guy. But the company is the first of its kind that's focused on Asian and Asian American content and storytelling. So we're all obviously about diversity, but we talk a lot about how Asians are not a monolith, that we have so many stories, that it's not just like sad immigrant stories. It's not what we're all about. You know, we really do span the gamut across the spectrum. And you know, we're trying to really kind of have our slate reflect that. So the fact that I get to work on a daily basis with incredible creatives who, you know, just are the people I dreamed of even orbiting at one point, and that I actually get to help tell their stories and push that forward, and you know, put something good out into the world, hopefully, that's been incredibly fulfilling and really, really exciting. And I think, as you guys all know, with the recent like Asian hate crimes and everything going on, it's like an increasingly, I think, important facet of the industry, and one I never thought I would get to work in, but I'm so lucky to be a part of.
Fantastic. You know, I think that we all like to do things in different lanes, and I think one thing that might tie us all together is is of course telling stories, because we're storytellers, but telling stories that make an impact. You know, I just celebrated an interesting anniversary yesterday. I put Shrek together 20 years ago. It came out 20 years ago, and it's hard to believe when I think about that it was 20 years, but somebody brought me a little children's book and said, what can we do with this? And we created a nice bidding competition, but 20 years later, that thing, you know, resonates. So the next question is, and we'll kind of
New
move
York
over.
Times thing about that, like
Yeah,
today.
there was a New York Times thing yesterday.
Yeah.
But talk a little bit about, you know, a project that you've been. We'll do the rounds again. We'll start out with Josh. What is a project when you didn't necessarily think it would be the thing that would, you know, have an impact, you know, X number of years later, but talk about the Secret Lives of Muslims, how that came about, and really what the impact has been since it's come out.
Sure. So yeah, it was like, maybe like 8 or 9 years ago. I was looking around and I was seeing obviously a lot of Islamophobia, and I had a lot of Muslim friends, and I was, you know, just, it was upsetting. And I grew up in upstate New York, and I was one of few Jewish kids in my town. And so I faced a lot of discrimination when I was growing up, and like, you know, from being called names to people throwing pennies at me, you know, to someone throwing a rock through the front window of our house. So I sort of lived it, and I kind of forgot about it. But when I saw this Islamophobia, brought those memories back, and I just felt like I had something I could say around this topic. So I went around with this idea, and couldn't get much traction. But the idea was to have a first person series of short documentaries where Muslim Americans would tell their stories. And so I brought it around, and couldn't get any traction. Then Donald Trump ran for president, and one of the potential funders called me and said, remember that project you pitched us? What are you doing with that? And I said, I'd love to do it. And they said, well, we'll fund it. So that was the Ford Foundation. And so I ended up doing this series, and it was, you know, just these short 2 to 3 minute films about where Muslim Americans would tell their stories. And I don't know, it just, you know, it was a small project, but it caught fire. And it just was, you know, it was on Facebook and YouTube. It just spread around really fast. And I think it was just one of those things where there was just nothing like it. And so people saw it, and, you know, I'd see the comments on Facebook where people would like tag their mother and say like, Mom, this is what I've been trying to explain to you. Watch this film, you know. And it was like, it was like serving as a tool for people to educate the people they cared about most, which was really cool. and exciting to me, because you know, it's so hard to change people's minds these days. And it was exciting to be a part of something that seemed to be doing that in some small way.
Great. What, if you could look at a project that you've done in the past or something you're working on now, what's going to be that, what is that legacy project that when it kind of define you and define everything about you? Say that's a crowning moment of, you know, career. You know, I mean, you've had a lot of those crowning moments. You represent amazing talents, but is there a project that you've worked on that even that you're doing right now? Because we're in a time of being, you know, woken up from, you know, a slumber, that you feel years from now people will continue to go back to that to be inspired by. Also could mean, I mean, you represent, you know, one of the greatest singer actresses and social activists in the business. I mean, maybe talk a little bit about how you are partners in a certain way with Beyonce in terms of what she does in terms of finding a project that has that impact on the world.
Put myself on mute there. Gosh, I was going to answer it in a different way. There's so many different examples. I guess I'm trying to narrow it down. I mean, like, you know, one example that I'm really excited about, and I'll come back to what you just asked there. But one project that I'm really pleased to have been a part of is I represent, one of my first clients was Anjanou Ellis. And a lot of people don't know her by name, but when they Google her and look her up, they're like, oh, like, you know, she played opposite Jamie Foxx and Ray, and she played opposite Chadwick Boseman in Get On Up. And she's, you know, was in Ava DuVernay's When They See Us and was nominated for an Emmy. And that performance, you know, she recently played in the Clark Sisters, and she's getting ready to play opposite Will Smith in the King Richard movie about Venus and Serena's dad for Warner Brothers. I mean, she just plays these quintessential mother roles. And I remember her saying something about her role in When They See Us. She said, I finally now see where my art can meet my activism. And you know, I think for a lot of people, you know, they kind of go down this path as actors and as a passion and as a love. But now I think where we are today, a lot of actors are starting to see, well, I can feed this part of my soul and this creative part of me by acting, but it can also serve another purpose by doing good or putting good messaging out or educating the world about maybe something. And that's pivotal scene where she, you know, steps in and challenges the prosecutor. And she says that her son had been questioned without having been appointed by, you know, constitutional law, a court appointed attorney, and he'd been questioned as a minor. And she took him and literally walked him out of that courtroom. I just thought that to me was something that I was really, really proud of, because it sent a real message to a lot of mothers and a lot of people out in the world that don't know that happens, that the youngsters, Black males are called upon by police and without proper legal representation. And also, you know, just being a mother and just her love for her son and that protective. So that was something I was proud of. You know, another totally like not even like substantive. I mean, about as surfacey as it gets. But something I'm really proud of, and it's kind of funny, but I just have to say it, is I almost got a producer credit, if I could have, on a movie called Johnson's Family Vacation. And this, I represented at the time Cedric the Entertainer, who stars in it, Bow Wow, who plays his son in it, Solange Knowles, who plays the daughter in it. I represented the writer-director, Christopher Erskine, and I represented Vanessa Williams, who was the mother in it. And so I felt like it was my movie. And it was just a fun family vacation movie. These two families, Steve Harvey and Cedric the Entertainer, going on, a family vacation, and the rivalry between these two brothers. But I'm so proud of it because, like, to your point with Shrek, that was made like over 20 years ago. And it was one of my kids' favorite movies that over the pandemic, we watched over and over again because it made them laugh. It was not, we were dealing with a lot of heaviness over these last years, and they would just laugh and just crack up, and they could literally recite the whole movie, just verbatim. And that just really made me happy because, I think that we have to find moments of laughter, and we have to find moments of escape. And I was glad that I was a part of that. But, as it relates to Mrs. Carter, it's been obviously an honor to represent her for almost 20 years. And I, she is such a vision. I mean, I remember, when I first started working with her, and she was a member of Destiny's Child singing group, and just to see how she has grown as a individual, as a woman, as a mother, as a wife. But I'll just end by saying something that I'm super proud of as it relates to her is, we talked about her doing, playing the role of Nala in Lion King. And music is her love. Acting is more of the side gig. But she was like, oh, that sounds like fun. That I love that movie. That sounds like fun. And so, we had her meet with Jon Favreau, and we ended up doing a deal. And what is interesting is how that small role of playing Nala in The Lion King, which is obviously one of the crown jewels of Disney, ended up turning into a passion project of hers, and her telling her version of what Lion King means through the movie that she made, Black is King, where she shot, I think it was probably 15 different videos, and went to Africa and really told it through a different lens and through a different eyes, and really giving a sense of pride to the motherland, and a tribute, and a salute to her son. And that's something that we'll always remember.
So let me segue to Pierre and this question. What is something that you have found that it's a piece of material that you found, and you worked your butt off to get other people to believe in it, and that and talk about that feeling of satisfaction and pride of having discovered something and brought it to the next level?
It's so funny you asked that, because I started my career on the, almost like the client side in a way. I was a young author. And so I went from being a client to being a rep. And I still remember the very first book that I ever sold was it was an international spy thriller. This author specializes in, kind of like every one of his books is like a new spy book in like a different foreign country. So it's all very, very sexy and mysterious. But he'd been like a kind of like an underserviced like author, and I ended up sending it around. And the very first book deal that I ever did, I was still a coordinator at ICM back then, what ended up going to Focus Features with Jake Gyllenhaal producing and starring. And it became this moment of just like, oh my gosh, I actually can affect change in someone's career. And like, this, he went from being a semi like random author to suddenly having a project with a studio with Jake Gyllenhaal. And then very soon after that, his other books started selling as well. And we met years later when I was working at Sony as an exec. I was in London, and he took me out for a meal, and he was like, you changed the course of my career. And I had just that feeling of being on that side. As you guys, Jon and Andrea, you've like both been reps, so you know that feeling. It's just been so rewarding. And I think the thing is that, we may not be directly saving lives in Hollywood, or like we always joke that like, oh, we're not saving lives here, but Hollywood does impact culture, and it shifts the conversation. And I think having that power is really important, because one day, as we've seen, given, the way the world is, like, it might actually end up saving a life depending on the stories we're telling. So that's been something that's really stuck with me. And to this day, like I talk about the fact that being in representation really taught me to fight for people. And that's something that I carry with me, even on the producing side.
So storytelling, going back to storytelling, has has changed. I think it took a big pivot point last summer when we were all at home and starting to watch television. I'm going to use the word television. It seems like a weird word, a weird word to use now, because it's so limited in a certain way. But it's all about the size of the screen, and we all have big screens at home. But talk about extended, we're all right now in a place where we tell storytelling in 2 hours, or we may tell it over 10 years. But talk a little bit about, we'll start out with Pier, to talking about how you're approaching this new way of telling stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I think someone actually asked it on the Q&A thing about the future of content and whether it's how the platforms are changing that. I mean, for me personally, I actually look at it as a huge opportunity for growth, especially for international storytelling and diverse storytelling. Before, I feel like even when I started in the industry, we never had a platform or a place to send anything that was not super American centric, right? Nowadays, the main argument for streaming is that it is building bridges. It's building, you can be living in country A and watching from country B and reading subtitles and introducing people to worlds, and it is, I think, helping build empathy. And so that's my argument, where I do think it's obviously changing the industry and the way things work, but at the same time, those opportunities have never existed before. The fact that there's now original content from all these different countries and at the click of a button, I think is pretty wonderful, and a whole new opportunity for storytellers who may have not had the chance to tell their stories before.
Mm-hmm. Josh, you've been in the non-scripted, in the nonfiction storytelling world. How are the consolidations and the mergers between Discovery and Warner Brothers, all the Fox groups, merging with Disney, Peacock, et cetera, et cetera? How is that all going to impact your story, your ability, or is it going to be a great thing for you as people consolidate? Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
I'm on the fence about it. I mean, as a business person, it's a good thing, because it really is a gold rush right now. There are, my friends and I are all selling projects and getting into bidding wars, and there are so many, people are just trying to one up each other and buy everything. And in that regard, it's a great time to be in business. In terms of, is it good for the audience, to be drinking from a fire hose? I guess it gives you a lot of options, but I feel like we're losing a common ground. I feel like my friends I'll look on my Instagram feed, and my filmmaker friends are like, my new film's on HBO tomorrow, and it doesn't get any coverage and no one hears about it, and it's gone in a week. And I just feel like, I don't know, that's not the way it used to be. It used to be you made something and it was around for a while and people talked about it and it got reviewed in the New York Times and it was the subject, at least for a few days, it was in conversation. And I don't feel like the conversation is happening in that way anymore. And so I don't know about impact. I worry that we're all kind of preaching to the choir now, because people just pick the thing they want to watch and it's going to be the thing that they agree with. And I'm really interested in trying to make things that are Trojan horses that will fool people into watching and thinking they're watching one thing, and then they get a message that they didn't expect.
I love that you use that phrase too, Trojan horse, because we use that a lot at A Major about Trojan horsing these themes, and because no one likes to be preached at, right? You're not watching a movie to get a lecture. And so how do we incept these ideas in the way that, Get Out, for example, did so wonderfully, and kind of make people think but still be entertaining.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Great. You have kids. And I would imagine when you start to put things together, you say, well, how am I, or people talk about things internally at any company you've been at. Has having kids changed how you look at material and how you also say, God, that is something my kids would really love. I'm going to really be an advocate for it.
Well, it's funny you say that because my kids are actually so much more forward than I am. I mean, they know everything before I do. They know, hot acts. They know the hot actors. They know, when you talk about a lot of the games being made into films, they know about the game. So I'm actually learning from them. I would like to think that I'm informing them, but it's really the other way around. It's really the other way around. I find myself literally, I go into, and also from a standpoint of, gosh, Josh, you brought up something that just, it hurts my heart. When the conversation, there used to be the conversation, there used to be that moment where, you would have at least a week to just kind of talk about that movie that came out or that series. And, I do binge because I have to, but I don't binge because I want to. And I think to your point, the question you asked earlier, John, what is that project that, you look back over the course of your career that really you're proud of, or that made an impact? Like 10 years from now, 15 years from now, we're not going to be able to do that because we've missed so much. I mean, there's so much I haven't even seen. And I feel like I'm in the center of the business, right. So much good stuff. And I will tell you that there's a lot of silver linings with the pandemic. There were so many films that came out this year that I never would have seen in the theater. And thank goodness that we did have the streaming, because I mean, even just look at the Academy Awards, Minari, like I would not have gone to see that in the theater. It was my favorite movie this year. You know what I mean? Like, and so I'm so grateful that on one hand, no, we don't have that water cooler moment of being able to talk about, a movie that's being reviewed for a week that's been, at the box office. But on another hand, I'm really fortunate that we do have the accessibility to be able to see things that we probably wouldn't have ever had a chance to be able to see.
Right. I mean, that idea of championing voices, the way that Minari happened, was extraordinary. It's a matter of, finding the right, the right production company, the right director, the right actor that kind of, is the key to making it happen. Do you, Pier, do you take chances on voices out there? It's somebody off of the blacklist or somebody who's won an award in Austin. How do you find those new voices?
I love that, Andrea, you mentioned Minari, because we're actually working with Lee Isaac Chung on a project right now, and he's the loveliest human ever. And obviously went from kind of like this indie filmmaker to now superstardom in the space. I think there's always that sense of satisfaction of like searching for that nugget of gold and finding it when you're the first one who discovers this new writer. Like I recently read this young, like new Harvard graduate who's Korean American, whose name is Minu Park, and now we have a project with him who just blew my mind. Like so funny, writing off the page. And he was, he had a manager, but he wasn't signed at any agency. We ended up bringing him to UTA. They signed him. And so that's something that I still get that thrill 100%, because I think ultimately, the goal is for us to move from narrative scarcity to narrative plenitude, right? We need to have enough stories of color, enough Asian stories, so that each singular story doesn't shoulder the burden of the entire community. Like the fact that people talk, oh, like Crazy Rich Asians or whatever. It's like, we're not, yes, there are some Crazy Rich Asians, but that's not the entire Asian community, nor is it Minari, or nor is it, like whatever it is. Like we are so diverse within that space. And so we should be allowed to be more than model minorities, right? To be flawed, to fail, be three-dimensional characters, and to be human. And I think that's something that is really, really exciting at the moment.
How do you, with all the things that are out there that you have to do, meaning the reading, the notes on the reading, the signing, Josh, your filmmaking, how do you balance it out with your families? You know, Josh, you started out being a dad a little bit later. Is it, how are you finding the balance of it all? And Dre, I know you've, got kids and active social situation, and with a husband who is a big attorney. You're politically active. How do you balance with families? How do you balance all that you're supposed to do professionally with all you need to do personally?
Josh, you want to take that one first?
Sure. Well, so yeah, John, I have a 9-month-old now too.
Oh,
I have a
wow.
5-year-old and a 9-month-old.
Congrats.
Thanks. I mean, I think
How are you?
That was like,
I'm tired.
And the sleep. How do you do?
And I'm speaking to you from a hotel room in Atlanta where I'm separated. I'm not with my family right now. So that sort of answers part of the question is, it's really hard. One of the things I've learned to do in the last year is just try to sleep less. And that allows me to get more done. But it's hard, I haven't totally cracked it yet. One of the things that I have been doing more, which is painful because I am a control freak as a creative person. And I'm very used to being in charge of my things and doing them my way. But one of the things I've done in the last couple of years is slowly to yield some of that, to work with collaborators who are like-minded, to even bring in other directors and give them some of my projects. Either I work alongside them or I produce and they direct. So I've been doing more and more of that so that I can actually spend time with my kids and my wife. And it's hard to get used to, but it's also probably a lot healthier. So but if anyone has ideas of how to do it better, I'm very open to listening.
Dre.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think that I do it well. I try. I definitely try. For me, it's a mindset. I guess pre-pandemic, when I'm at work, and I try to be 100% at work. And, I will tell my kiddos that when we will deal with whatever the issue is when I get home, but I'm at work right now. Mommy's at work. Obviously that changed in this last year, but when I'm at home, I try to be at home and I try to create some boundaries, because there was a point in time when I was younger in my career where I was 24/7 available to clients. And any time of the day, my phone was right by my ear. So if they called, I was on it, and you have to create you gotta create some boundaries to protect yourself and to have that balance. And so now what I do is, after I don't go to bed until 12 or 1 or sometimes even later, but sometimes 2. But I try that at that point that I do decide to go to bed, I try to leave my phone downstairs so that I'm not checking it throughout the night. And just, and I just try to say, let me at least have these few hours of trying to get a good night's sleep, because I'm going to give it all to you the next morning. It will be, all to you. And I also try to find some time to work out, because not just from a weight maintenance, but also just to kind of keep, my mind fresh and fresh blood and, releasing toxins. So I try to, even if it's just 5 minutes, sometimes I'm running in the morning and I'll just in the bathroom, I'll jump down and I'll do my sit-ups and my crunches and my leg lifts. I was like, okay, I got 5 minutes in, just a little something. Cause I said, that's for me. I'm going to do that for me. If I can do a little something for me from anywhere from 5 minutes to 40 minutes a day, I try to do that, because, we owe that to ourselves. We owe that to ourselves. So I try to do that in a balance and ask for help. I used to also be the type of person where I was to your point, Josh, being a control freak, it could not be done unless I did it, because I know if I do it, it's going to be done right and it's going to be done to my liking. But I have to kind of sometimes now say, you know what, it's okay if it's not 100% that way. I'm going to do the best I can. We'll do the best I can, and then we'll keep it moving and move on to the next.
So one more question, and is to Pier. You're an amazing traveler. I think that there was something like 60 countries. I mean, it sounds crazy. You know, I don't even know how you get to 60 countries, but okay. So the pandemic is going to be over in a moment, and you are going to be out there going and traveling around the world. Where do you want to go that you either have been before and you want to just fill yourself up because you want to go back to that place, or where haven't you been that you say, I want this new challenge?
So travel is something that like I'm never going to get out of my system. The current tally is 90 countries across 7 continents. And the crazy part, like the story I always tell is actually, so after ICM, instead of jumping into something right away, I actually took a gap year because of my international status. I couldn't take one after graduating. So I was like, I'm doing a gap year. And I ended up solo backpacking across Southern Africa, completely life-changing, discovered like so much, not just about myself, but the continent, came back. And because of that trip, I had a meeting with Sanford Panich, who, you know, is the head of Sony, and I mentioned that I'd been to Africa, and he was like, I was just in Africa. So we started talking about African content, you know, creators coming from the continent that's kind of being overlooked. And by the end of the meeting, he asked, did you ever want to be a studio exec? And so I always talk about that story as like, you know, we are all storytellers. We, like, young people ask, and you know, we're seeing this chat here, like, how do I get into, how do I break through? Craft your own story. You know, we all want to tell stories, but not at the expense, I think, of your own, to live your own life. And I'm always a proponent for like, take that time off if you need it. Take care of your mental health. Like, nothing is more important than health, as we've seen this past year during COVID, you know, and ultimately, like, we shouldn't lose the fun of storytelling, right? That should be at the essence of it. And so, you know, my time abroad like completely changed my life and my career as well. And I think that that's something that now, like, people know me as like the person who, like, the exec who writes books and travels and like runs scuba diving trips. And it makes you a little bit, I think, like just a little bit different. It allows you to really still, you know, kind of live your story as well.
Right, and keep getting inspired by, you know, by the places you go, by the people you meet along the way, by the stories that you hear from people along the way. It fills you up.
The very first movie set I was ever on, apart from making movies at Tufts, was actually a film set that I stumbled onto in South Africa. And flash forward a year, I was meeting with a South African director who, he was like, told him the story, and he goes, what movie was it? It literally turned out he had written that movie.
Oh, wow.
And so that's just how tiny the world is. And yeah.
Well, I got inspired by listening to your stories. I know everybody who's been part of this conversation will go back and look at their lives and say, I've got to travel more. I've got to hug my kids more. I've got to, you know, appreciate life more, because I think we're about to hit reset and go back to our lives, and our lives are not going to be the same as they were, you know, back in early March. You know, we are going to go back in, and I think it's an opportunity for all of us to pivot in a very positive, exciting direction. So thank you for, you know, allowing me to be part of your group today and get inspired by you guys.
Jon, by the way, if someone had told me, I don't know, when I first started the industry, that I was going to one day be on like a talk with you, I would have freaked out. Because I still remember going to like a Tufts alumni event and you were a speaker there, and I was like, oh my God, that's like this big agent from CAA.
Well, Jon, we haven't had a moment to really highlight you, but you are a legend, and you are incredible, and you have inspired us. And, you know, I mean, you know, the running joke for years at CAA was that Jon Levin is like this mad scientist. He's a genius. He is a genius. He comes up with stories and kernels of ideas from just articles and books and short stories. And you've done so much and inspired so many people. And we're excited about this next chapter for you in your career.
Well, I think that, you know, we get to reinvent ourselves with every project that we do is a moment of reinvention. it's a moment of telling our narrative in a slightly different way. It's another chapter in what we do. So I try in every project that I get involved with now is to move the narrative, our collective narrative, our global narrative, in a positive direction by the nature of the stories that we tell. And I think that it is, when in my speech I gave when I left CAA, it's taking a line from Peter Parker in Spider-Man, is that there is a responsibility with power, and the responsibility with power is to do good. I have another project it's do no harm. I think that we as filmmakers and representatives of filmmakers have that obligation out there with whatever we do, is that we move the narrative in a positive, filling capacity. So thank you for the sweet words. And I can't wait to see what you all will be doing in the next few months. And I feel very very honored and always proud to be a Jumbo. So
Same.
Amy, thank you. I guess I'll hand it over to you to say the final goodbyes.
Sure thing. I don't think I can follow any of that, but I just want to thank everyone who tuned in tonight, and of course our amazing panelists, Jon, Andrea, Pier, and Josh. You're inspiring each other, but you've more than inspired all of us to go out and listen to stories and write our own stories and just follow a new journey. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and have a great night. And we hope to see you at a future event. Thanks, guys.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Be
Bye.
safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.